All right. Welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is a Wednesday. I always say it. Wednesday's a nice day for me. I don't know. It's sort of halfway through the week, and I'll be on at least next week, Monday, Tuesday. Then there's Christmas Eve is the 24th. Probably will be on the 24th. We have a candidate for office on the 23rd. At least that's the hope. We should have that candidate on the... Yeah, no, it's confirmed. So we'll have that. We've got a candidate tomorrow. So pretty exciting stuff. We'll be going at least into next week before we close the show up for the year, and then of course start up again in 25. And so a good friend yesterday, hadn't seen in a long time, had a great dinner and drinks, and they said they wanted to join me on Halitics. They were very interested in talking about aspects of their life, their career. So really looking forward to having that guest on. I'm not going to identify who they are yet. We'll do that when everything's confirmed, but I'm certainly excited to make that reconnection with a close friend. Bloody Bondi. Yeah, we talked about this yesterday and also on Monday with Mike Olis, yesterday with Arlen, of course. And I really think this situation, what happened in Sydney, the reaction from Israel, the reaction on social media here, the reaction from Australian Prime Minister Albanese, I think all of that warrants a little more discussion, a little more scrutiny. My goal here, I always say, that we have like an overarching mantra at Halitics, which is we want a world where everyone has enough and no one has too much. So that's kind of the forest, right? The trees, we want less violence. And I certainly would say that in a world where everyone has enough and no one has too much, you'd have far, far less violence than you do now. I mean, that's one of the many, many benefits of great reductions in inequality, great reductions in poverty rates, great reductions or elimination of massive, or as I guess Tom Hartman calls it, morbid, what does he call it? Morbid wealth, morbidly rich people, right? Yeah, we should get rid of that. I agree with Hartman there. I think the problem with Hartman is he trains all of his fire ever. And this guy is a smart guy, and he's a good writer, and he talks well. I mean, I don't think he talks as well. Some people think he's so brilliant. He's bright. He's a good writer. He trains all of his fire, all of his ammo, uses all of his talent against the Republicans and the Republican Party and pretty much Trump at this time. And, that's just, to me, intellectually dishonest. The Democrats deserve quite a bit of the blame. And if you want to solve the problem, you're not going to solve it by targeting Republicans. You're going to solve it by changing the Democratic Party or replacing the Democratic Party with a truly progressive, truly left party, or at least at a minimum, frightening, scaring Democratic lawmakers from the left. That's the only way I see real change happening in this country. And Hartman, you're not going to hear that from him, and you're not going to hear that from Reich and some of these other apologists for the Democratic Party. So that's what my job is. That's what I view my responsibility. That's why I do this show. What happened in Sydney is a terrible crime, obviously. 1,000 people. I didn't realize they had this huge celebration. Seems like a lot, doesn't it? 1,000. I mean, I don't know. It's a big beach. You see the picture there I put up. I didn't know there were 1,000 people. So 15 dead is not really surprising. Someone starts taking shots at a crowded beach. They're going to hit a lot of people, presumably, and kill them. I want this to stop. I don't want this to happen anymore. I think that the response by many on social media, by Zionists, by Israel apologists, and maybe by just frightened Jews who see themselves and their religion under attack, I think the response that just blames anti-Semitism, blames the eternal scourge of Jew hatred for this, I think that's very misguided. I don't think that's the way you stop these tragedies. And I think if that's what you're going to say, if you're going to say, well, people just hate Jews, this is what happens, and we've got to stop them, we've got to squash them out. Netanyahu saying, well, the real problem here is that Australia is recognizing the Palestinian state. They're giving aid and comfort to anti-Semites. If that's your attitude, then you're saying we can't stop this. The only thing we can do is just keep killing more and more anti-Semites until they're all gone, which, of course, would never happen. So I don't view that as in any way a useful answer or solution to just simply say, well, it's just something that's there. It's a disease. It's like cancer. We can't ever eliminate it. Maybe that's true, but we can reduce the number of incidents. We can reduce the people who get or who suffer from it, like with cancer, right? I mean, there's always going to be some of those cells inside people's bodies that go rogue, that go wild and start multiplying in dangerous ways and that destroy the body. But there are lots of ways to reduce the number of people who succumb to cancer in various ways, whether you can reduce the number of actual incidents, right? By say, don't smoke. If you don't smoke, if we clean not just our own lungs by not smoking tobacco, but also stop polluting, greatly reduce the number of carcinogens we pump into the atmosphere, reduce the amount of fossil fuels that we burn. That will reduce the number of cancers that people get. We eat more healthily. We eat less fatty foods. That's going to reduce the number of cancers that people get. There are various ways. We live a less stressful life. We take longer breaks from our job. We exercise more. These are all things we can do. We're not going to completely eliminate cancer. It's going to come for some of us, but there'll be less of it. The same thing with incidents of anti-Semitism, with attacks. We can't completely eliminate it, but if we reduce wealth and income inequality, if we reduce the crimes of the state of Israel, if we stop supporting Israel, then there will also be less attacks on Jews. Now, I don't know that every attack on a Jew, I don't buy it. I mean, I've heard people say, well, if you're Jews attacked, it's anti-Semitism. Well, it's anti-Semitism if the attack is because the individual is Jewish. If the attack is because the individual is perceived as a supporter of Israel, then I don't necessarily call that anti-Semitism at all. Israel is a rogue state. Israel is a criminal state, just as Nazi Germany was in the 1940s. I wouldn't say someone who attacks a Nazi, who attacks a German who's a member of the Nazi Party, who's prominently known for being a supporter of Nazi Germany, that doesn't make you a German phobe. It just means you don't like Nazis. And you're prepared to act violently in response. Is that okay? We can argue that point. Now, not all Germans were Nazis. Not all Jews are supporters of the Israeli genocide, but many are, tragically. And many at that beach in Sydney were, and the shooters, I believe were Muslim based on their names, were probably motivated in part by hatred of Israel, hatred of what Israel is doing, hatred of the people who support what Israel is doing, which the Chabad Lubavitcher, which organized the event, is doing. It supports Israel. It's overt supporters of the settlements in the West Bank, among other things. And I don't think that should get lost in the shuffle. On social media, I pointed this out in response to a post that I believe Muslim had posted, a comment that this was a pure anti-Semitic act, just as Zoran Mamdani called it pure anti-Semitism. Well, I'm not nearly as convinced as they are. Now, that doesn't make it okay But it wasn't just some random Jewish person or some random group of Jewish people who were targeted. It was a group that was organized by the Chabad Lubavitcher in Sydney. And Chabad Lubavitcher is closely associated with the settlement movement, the colonizing of the West Bank. I don't think it's a stretch to believe that the shooters were well aware of this fact. And to the extent that's true, then instead of saying, okay, I'm a Jew, I'm likely to be a victim, you have to say to yourself, am I associated with the colonization of Palestine by Israel? Am I associated with land theft? Am I participating in those activities? If I do, I'm putting a target on my back. I think you also have to say to yourself, if you're Jewish, as I am, what Israel is doing is making us all less safe. Now, I don't view myself as a victim of Israel. The victims of Israel are in Palestine or in Gaza or in the West Bank or in Lebanon and Syria and Iran. Those are the victims of Israel. I'm not a victim, but Israel's actions are not making me safer. And they are also making me incredibly ashamed and disgusted. All right, 240-242-5646, 240-240-5, did I say that wrong? 240-242-5646, 240-242-5646. Let me just, and I just said, look, Israel they just won't stop killing Palestinians. That's just what they do, right? Like there's the band that does the final countdown. I can't remember what it is, some Euro band. And they just always do it. There's an ad, and they like, if you're whatever that band is called, then what you do is you play the final countdown at your concerts. And if you're Israel, I guess what you do is you colonize and you steal land and you kill Palestinians. This is from 1 hour ago. Well, it's a few hours now. I cut it out an hour ago. IDF confirms mortar shell misfired in Gaza City, is aware of casualties. They're really sorry about that. They don't even apologize. 11 wounded, 1 critical after IDF, Israeli occupying force shelling in central Gaza City. And it was right by that so-called yellow line where Israel's allowed to go, we can go up to the yellow line. I stepped over the line. Israel does all these incredibly provocative acts, violent acts, killing people. Can you imagine if the Palestinians were taking the actions that Israel was, that they were killing anywhere near the number of people that Israel kills at any one point? What little is left, what little of Palestine Israel is left standing would be completely razed. So, this is what generates hatred. This is what really calls people to just, their blood to boil. People, look, I don't think it's that big a stretch to compare those who attack Israelis, Israel sympathizers with what Luigi Mangione did, the shooter, and I know some people say he isn't, it seems clear he is, the shooter of the healthcare executive in the streets of Manhattan, who's become sort of a Robin Hood figure, a hero. People are saying, there's death panels. The for-profit health insurance companies convene death panels. They decide when they're going to cut off necessary care, when they're going to deny payment to doctors for treatment, and they kill people. So Luigi was simply acting in a way in self-defense, taking on a perpetrator, the president of the CEO of the healthcare company, United Healthcare, taking on that perp. And I think a lot of people understandably, and I would say justifiably, view it that way. Well, if you see in the news, if you see in your TikTok or wherever you watch videos, evidence day after day of bloody, wholly unjust killings by a country, and its supporters are waving the flag in your face and gloating about it and celebrating on a beach, well, that is clearly extremely provocative. And many innocent people are going to be victimized as well. I like Revolutionary Change with Jen Perlman. I think that's a good show. I really do. I think they do a nice job, her and Peter Hager. They kind of jumped the shark. Their latest video, I'm not going to play clips of it. Their argument is that this was a false flag, that Israel is the perpetrator, that Israel is responsible for the shooting in at Bondi Beach, that they somehow maybe they put up the family, the father and son, Naveed Akram, supposedly Israel somehow did this deliberately because they wanted to gin up sympathy for Israel and for Jews around the world, and to foment a reaction where people would want to suppress Muslims. So that's the argument that Revolutionary Change made, and it just doesn't. I don't. Look, no. And you can see it's been debunked. Here it is. BBC fake Facebook profile claims Bondi attacker from Israel. In fact, the image has been debunked as, now look, could BBC be lying? Could they be part of this conspiracy? Sure. I don't trust any media that far. I don't believe that if this were true, that the media wouldn't be all over the story. If they can find, if there was credible argument. Now, look, there's been cases where the media really has covered things up. I was a believer in 2005 and 2006 that at least some aspects of 9/11 were an inside job. I still am very suspicious of that Building 7 collapse. That was always my view. And every pretty much mainstream media outlet, or every mainstream media outlet, completely debunked that, argued it wasn't true. Popular Mechanics had some article. That said, there were scientists, there were architects, there were engineers who said, no, wait a second. This doesn't look right. Buildings don't just collapse in their own footprint, especially when they're not even traumatized, right? Building 7 wasn't even hit by a plane. Larry Silverman, the owner of the towers, said, we decided to pull the building. Very suspicious. Where are the experts who are coming out and saying, yeah, it was Israel? Who? Because if there are some, I want to hear about them. I am the first person to blame Israel for just about everything. I don't think Israel was behind this attack. Of course, they're going to take advantage of it. Of course, they're going to use it as best they can to gin up sympathy for Israel. And do they care about the lives of the Jews that were killed? I don't think they give a crap. I don't think Netanyahu, he's a sociopath. He doesn't care about anybody's life but his own. But the fact is that the claim that the Bondi attacker was from Israel that's been on social media has been debunked. And, we do better when we argue based on the truth, right? Based on evidence-based arguments, not arguments that are just simply, absurd, conspiratorial, without any truth, any factual basis. And so you can see this guy, David Cohen, supposedly was the shooter, and it's false. No, he wasn't. And the images were ginned up. They were fabricated AI. Another argument that I saw made by Hager and Jen Perlman on Revolutionary Change was that one of the victims really wasn't even shot. It was a total phony. Some were killed, but this guy wasn't. This is a guy, Arsen is his name, Arsen Ostrovsky. Apparently, he was also in at that Nova Festival when it was attacked on October 7, 23. And so this image has been posted. This is what the Perlman and Hager put up on Revolutionary Change. Look, he's getting ketchup smeared on his face beforehand, laughing about it. He's not really shot at all. And you can see this has been also debunked as AI generated. And there was another site which said this is not AI, but it seems pretty clear it was. So, look, you got strong. You don't need, if you want to say Israel's responsible, or at least Israel's actions are a huge reason for whatever upsurge in attacks on Jews we've seen, I'm with you 100%. You don't need to go to Israel is actually perpetrating massacres against Jews as false flag events so that the world will somehow regain the sympathy that it once had but no longer does for Israel. You don't have to go there. The way to respond is to simply say these are occurring in large part because Israel is so violent, because Israel is so cruel, because Israel is so sadistic. And virtually powerless people, seeing their co-religionists, seeing people from their, maybe the town or the area where they grew up, people that they know, people that they love being killed, well, they're not going to be happy about it, and they're going to do whatever they can in their limited abilities, their limited power to respond. If you want to join me, love to talk to you, 240-242-5646. Don't forget, by the way, we do want you to subscribe now. If you haven't yet, please do. There's that little bell, and go ahead and subscribe, and also click like. We'd love to see the thumbs up. Any interaction, any commentary is always welcome right here at Halitics. And I haven't been putting the Facebook page GIF, but yeah, join us on Facebook as well. We have lots of really cool, I think they're really good discussions about all the issues of the day on our Facebook page. 240-242-5646. Bloody Bondi is our topic today. Hey, Ari, good to see you in the chat. One of the phenomena that I've noticed, a phenomenon that I have noticed, is this sort of and we definitely saw this in right-wing media, right-wing radio by the end of the 1990s into the 2000s, where they all push the same narrative. They all argue the same talking points. It's like there's one source that calls up, or that Limbaugh and Hannity, obviously Limbaugh is dead now, but Hannity and whoever else, whatever other sordid people that, engaged in that kind of propaganda. They would all kind of read from the same script, whatever narrative they wanted to push, they would push. And it would be, one show after another, where you hear the same conversation about the Clintons, about Barack Obama, whoever it was they wanted to attack. And, I'm not saying that there weren't good reasons to criticize the Clintons and Barack Obama, but they didn't do it in an honest and above board fashion. What we also are now seeing is united attacks again in support of Israel, right? Using Israel as the victim, as the pure white knight in shining armor. So what Eric Adams said is, hey, this is globalize the Intifada writ large. This is why we told you we've got to get rid of that term, globalize the Intifada, because that's what this is. It's an uprising against Israel. And there you see Adams. I showed this yesterday, and I thought it was amusing what Talia Jane wrote. Stop inciting Islamophobic hate, you bigoted piece of ass. I agree that's what he's doing there, but I think it's really interesting that the argument by Adams, that this is globalizing the Intifada writ large. This is the dangers of that phrase. it kind of, doesn't it, put the lie to the argument that this was some sort of Jew hatred, that this was anti-Semitism. Because globalize the intifada is a specific response. It's resistance to Israel. That's what it means. Even the most staunch opponents of the phrase globalize the intifada are saying this is about unfair attacks on Israel, that we're going to make it about Israel wherever throughout the world, right? Well, if it's about Israel, then it's not about Jews. It's about Israeli occupation. It's about Israeli genocide. It's about Israeli injustice. So if you're going to accept that what happened in Sydney was really a response to Israel, then it really wasn't anti-Semitism, now was it? By the way, I think it probably was in part globalizing the intifada. This is uprising, and people who have little or no power, as I've said before, they're going to lash out in whatever way they can. I mentioned, by the way, 240-242-5646, we'd love to tell you, I mentioned that we're seeing the same arguments made, the use of the same talking points by varied sources. So you saw Eric Adams saying, this is the problem with globalize the intifada. Well, that's exactly what Bret Stephens, who is also like Eric Adams, a piece of S, he makes the exact same claim. So you got to wonder, were Adams, were Stephens, were others watching some, other Fox, I don't know, Newsmax, and they came up, some smart guy, propagandist came up with the argument, hey, let's just say this is the problem with globalizing intifada, and we're all going to say it. We're all going to keep repeating it. We do see Israeli Hasbara makes its way into the media from varied sources. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that when it comes to the demonizing of TikTok as the main villain when it comes to hatred of Israel, when it comes to criticism of Israel. Somehow it's social media's fault, it's TikTok's fault. It's not what Israel's doing. And this is a canard that's being repeated ad nauseum. And now we see more recently here, Bret Stephens saying Bondi Beach is what globalized the intifada looks like, which is exactly what, of course, Eric Adams said as well. And I love the two comments by Linda M.A. Only the Times would print a headline this twisted. Bondi Beach has nothing to do with the Palestinian struggle. And to say it does is journalistic malpractice. Well, actually, I don't agree with that. I think there is a connection. But my point, and maybe it is globalizing the intifada, but it's rather than condemning the phrase, rather than saying this is what, these are the poisonous fruits of the phrase globalize the intifada. What I would like the New York Times to say is, hey, Israel is a rogue state. Israel's a genocidal state. We haven't seen a country as evil in 80 plus years, probably. I mean, we could go, Pol Pot's Cambodia or what have you, but Israel's right there at the top. Certainly not a developed, right, a first world country that's acted quite as evilly as Israel. I think you have to go back to Nazi Germany to find that. So I don't think it's wrong to say this could be globalizing the intifada, but the response should be, and that's why Israel needs to stop killing people, because Israel has to stop its genocide. But the New York Times won't say that. They won't even call that. And then Dan Sheehan says, if anyone is wondering why thousands upon thousands of people have canceled their NYT subscriptions over the past 2 years, the steady flow of op-eds like this one is one of the main reasons. The other being the paper's ludicrously compromised Middle East desk. And, well, I think this is part of that, right? I mean, Bret Stephens is an opinion writer, but obviously it's all part of their Middle East coverage to try to protect, I guess, the defenders of Israel at all costs. To blame those responding, those who are reacting to Israeli occupation for the problems in the world, rather than say, no, the real problem is what Israel is doing. I pointed out a couple of examples where people that I kind of agree with got it wrong. I mean, they said, yeah, this is Israel that's actually committed the murders, right? That's not true. I mean, because anything's possible. It sure doesn't seem likely, right? There's no evidence to support it. But you also see Hezbollah on the other side, right, where Israel, where its supporters are somehow trying to make the crime or the trying to universalize, globalize hatred against Muslims for what happened, even though it was clearly the act of a couple of gunmen, crazed gunmen. Really. They may have been crazed because they're so upset by what they're seeing in their social media, but they're still crazed. And you can see here, this guy Gunther Eagleman says, Muslims celebrating the terrorist attack, right? This is what we heard after 9/11 as well. All these Muslims celebrating the attack on the United States, all these Muslims all over the world celebrating the killings in Israel on October 7th. So here's Gunther Eagleman, Muslims celebrating this terrorist attack in Australia. Masks are off. And for all the criticism that X gets, right? All the attacks for how it's propaganda, and, it is probably mostly, from Musk. I don't believe a lot of, I always take everything with a grain of salt. Look, X did the right thing. This guy Gunther Eagleman, fomenting Islamophobia. And what does X do? It says, no, it's not celebrating. Nobody's celebrating the terrorist attack. The footage shown matches fireworks from scheduled Sydney Christmas Carol events, not people celebrating the Bondi Beach attack. Major news outlets give no evidence of celebratory activity. Moreover, if you want to slander Muslims falsely, we're going to point out that actually the hero, the savior, was a Muslim shopkeeper. So, yeah, good job there, X, for correcting the record. Couple more points here that I think are worth showing here. I don't think I showed this clip, this X piece yesterday. I think so, from The Resonance. I don't know who this person is, but I liked what they had to say. As a Jewish person, I don't feel safe now. It's not because Israel's unsafe, because it's Jewish. Jews are unsafe because of Israel. Yeah. That simple. No question about it. Appreciate that very, very much. Hanukkah is right now. That was what that Bondi Beach celebration was. It was for Hanukkah. Kind of a minor holiday, but Chabad Lubavitcher making a big deal of it. I guess kind of as an antidote or to be counter to the Christmas celebrations at the same time. And as we've talked about, Chabad Lubavitcher is a exponent of violence, right? I mean, they're responsible for, or they certainly are fomenting, promoting violence. I think we need to keep that in mind, that they're specifically a bad actor, right? It's not just Jews that were attacked. It was Jewish people celebrating at a Chabad Lubavitcher event. And Chabad Lubavitcher, again, is a well-known supporter of Israeli extreme actions, extreme activities against Palestine. And that's something to really, really keep in mind. So Aaron Monte points out that it's Israel and its atrocities that are undoubtedly, he says, the number one driver of anti-Semitism worldwide. I agree. I think it's important to even be more specific here. It isn't just that there are people who hate Jews because of what Israel's doing and unfairly, in my opinion, blame all Jews for what Israel's doing. It's important to realize that this attack was against a Jewish community, at least was at an event that was led by a specific community within the broader Jewish diaspora that is closely associated with the atrocities that Israel's committing. But Mate points out, and I think accurately so, 15 civilians were killed in the massacre targeting Sydney's Jewish community. See, and I think that's where he gets it a little bit wrong. I think it was targeting that Chabad Lubavitcher community. That's where the shooting was. A day in which Israel massacres 15 Palestinian civilians in Gaza would be at the low end, right? At the low end of the average. And I think that's a very important point because all life is we should regard all life as precious. And we should always be looking for ways to preserve life, to enrich life, to enhance life. And those who simply single out attacks by Palestine supporters, by Palestine sympathizers, or attacks on the Jewish community as the problem are missing the forest for the trees. No question about it. They're selectively choosing crimes that can be understood only in a broader context. And by doing that, they're almost certainly making it much more likely that more of those crimes will occur. So my hat's off to Monte for pointing this out. I think it is important also, though, to acknowledge just how bad this Chabad Lubavitcher is. And I did share this yesterday from 2020, right? This is Eric Yaffe and the Israeli newspaper Haaretz. Is Chabad about to make the most calamitous mistake in its history? Israel's most fanatic settlers on annexation. Now, I want to be clear. Chabad is not only Chabad Lubavitcher. So this could be another Chabad, but it isn't. Haaretz is very, very clear that the specific Chabad that they're calling out for being fanatical settlers, fanatical supporters of the occupation in the West Bank is the Chabad Lubavitch. And I saw a guy on social media say, well, even if that's true, that doesn't mean the attack was because of what Chabad Lubavitch does, unless you can somehow prove that the shooters knew that Chabad Lubavitch was part of the Greater Israel Project, was a promoter of the Greater Israel Project. Well, I think people know that. I think they read Haaretz. They can easily find out. And especially if you're a Muslim, especially if you're maybe Palestinian or a Palestine sympathizer, it's not hard to figure this stuff out. It didn't take me any time. So when you're prepared to wring your hands and fret and say how awful this is and Jews are victims and Jews are under attack, please just step back and look at a bigger picture, because that's how you can act in a way that will reduce, or at least hopefully reduce, the likelihood that these types of killings will occur. I showed you a 2020 piece from Haaretz that made the point that the Chabad Lubavitch is among the most aggressive supporters of the settlements in the West Bank. This is from a much more recent article this year, over the summer. So not in response to the latest attack in Sydney, but just simply saying, hey, we got a real problem here with these Chabad Lubavitch people. They are so extreme. they are promoting the violence against Palestine that is so destructive, so destabilizing, and by the way, also makes Jews less safe. That is what Haaretz pointed out. Here, this is June 18, 25. Let me see if I can make that a little bigger. There's a cutout of Ben Gvir. He's the Israeli occupying force minister, one of the most bloodthirsty, violent war criminals there is. And so there's Lubavitch, representative there, young man standing behind the cardboard cutout. Part of the Chabad Lubavitch movement. Chabad's growing alliance with far-right minister Ben Gvir. Behind the smiles and donut stands, right? That's the whole thing. Oh, we give out these free donuts, because it's they're big supporters of Hanukkah. Hanukkah is the holiday of donuts because donuts are fried in oil, and Hanukkah is the holiday that celebrates the 8 days of the menorah, the light that lasted for 8 days. When they thought they had not enough for more than one night. They had enough for 8, and that kept the Jewish people alive while the Maccabees were able to rally them to fight off their oppressors. So Haaretz is saying, wait a second, they're so great, they share all these donuts, everyone's happy about those donuts, but you know what? They're big supporters of the Greater Israel Project, of the expansion of Israel into lands that previously were not occupied by Jews. And now they're taking over the olive farms, and they're promoting the land grab in Gaza. And they point this out, right? It's right-wing, according to Haaretz. Messianic ideology is emerging openly alongside a growing political alliance with Ben Gvir. I don't think you can understand the Sydney attack without understanding that. All right, more on the power, the control that Israel seems to exert in our country among many of our most influential people. Among our influencers. So I was really taken by this. I was taken by the fact that both Eric Adams and the New York Times, or Brett Stevens in the New York Times, claim that the Sydney attack is part of this globalize the Intifada, which I actually don't totally disagree with, but they're using it to attack Mamdani and also to condemn the attacks rather than to say, okay, this has to be understood within the context of the Israeli genocide. What about trying to explain away all the opposition to Israel that we're seeing around our country and really around the world, especially among younger people? This is very troubling to, I guess, Israel supporters, among them Vice President Hillary Clinton. She has made clear her alliance, her allegiance to Israel. And you can see a blank screen with a little arrow in it. Let's play the video.
Students, smart, well-educated young people from our own country, from around the world, where were they getting their information? They were getting their information from social media, particularly TikTok. That is where they were learning about what happened on October 7th, what happened in the days, weeks, and months to follow. That's a serious problem. It's a serious problem for democracy, whether it's Israel or the United States, and it's a serious problem for our young people. It's not.
I'm going to stop it there. I'm going to get back to the rest of this video. But why is it a serious? See, this is the thing. Clinton just simply says, it's a problem that young people learned about October 7 on social media. That's a problem for our democracy. I have my problems with social media. I'm not saying there can't be a connection between social media and loss of freedom. But draw the line, Hillary. Were folks misled? Did they get a misunderstanding, a misapprehension of what happened? Is that because democracy thrives when people have good information, when they understand what's happening in the world around them and are able to determine the right ways to respond to and try to solve problems. But you're just saying the problem is that people learned about specifically 10/7 on social media. But why is it a problem? Will she tell us?
The usual suspects, it is a lot of young Jewish Americans who don't know the history and don't understand. When you would try to talk to them to engage in some kind of reasonable discussion, it was very difficult because they did not know history.
So is it that TikTok didn't give them the history? Because I read the New York Times and I don't see, usually there's a long history there about how Israel has been beset, Israel's been the victim. But that's a very misleading history. It's a very selective history. I'm not convinced that TikTok is giving, and you haven't provided any evidence that TikTok is giving bad evidence or bad information to young people. But I would ask you this, Clinton. You're upset because when you try to have these intellectual conversations with young people, you try to enlighten them, and they don't seem so welcome. They don't seem to welcome your views. Are you welcoming theirs? Do you listen? Do you say, yeah, maybe you make a good point. Maybe Israel didn't need to kill 70,000 Palestinians, the great majority of whom were women and children. Maybe that really wasn't so good. Do you ever say that? Did you think about that? Did you learn from them? Because one of the most frustrating aspects I find when I do my program is people who just simply insist that you're supposed to listen to them, but they don't have to ever listen to you. It's always has to be a two-way street.
Little context, and what they were being told on social media was not just one-sided, it was pure propaganda. More than 50% of young
So then she goes on, it's not the first time social media has been blamed. So yeah, she is attributing the fact that so many Americans are turning against Israel, not to what Israel's doing, not to the fact that they're learning what Israel's doing, or I guess she is saying they're learning what Israel's doing. And they shouldn't. Maybe that's what she wants. She wants Americans to be ignorant. That was maybe a week ago, 2 weeks ago. Here's another Democrat, right? Hillary Clinton, certainly a prominent Democrat. Sarah Hurwitz. I know these have made a lot. This has been on in a lot of videos, but I'm playing it now because I thought it was very interesting that you had three prominent influencers, three people who are well known in their spaces or just flat out well known. I mean, Hillary Clinton is just flat out well known. I guess Sarah Hurwitz is well known within her space. And then we'll hear from Van Jones. They're all saying the exact same thing. They're all giving the exact same message. It's somehow social media's fault, not Israel's fault, not the criminals' fault that their actions are being exposed, but somehow the people who are telling you what the criminal is doing, it's their fault.
I think that since October 7th, but really before then, there have been huge shifts in America on how people think about Jews and Israel. And I think that is especially true of young people. So we are now wrestling.
So again, young people, right? That's what Hillary said. Now Hurwitz, same thing. The problem is young people have a different view than they used to have. Hillary said it's a lot of young Jews too. I mean, I wish I could include myself in that group of young people, but I'm old.
A new, I think, generational divide here. And I think that's particularly true in that social media is now our source of media. And this, it used to be that the media you got in America was American media.
So all of them, it's just, or both of them, right? It's a social media problem. It was TikTok, according to Hillary. Here is social media. Sarah Hurwitz. So they're all, and this is, I guess, the Netanyahu playbook. I just think it's really interesting that we're seeing this over and over again. Hey, Ken, how you doing? Hey, Splash. I don't know. I'm supposed to call you Splash, not Ken. Hey, Splash. I'm not going to play more of her with. She just sort of turns my stomach. She was at the Rebuild Israel, Jewish Federation's Rebuild Israel. One thing that I also find so offensive about these sort of conclaves is they're completely one-sided. They only allow one view. Hillary complains, oh, these kids are getting a one-sided view. At that event she was at, totally one-sided, some sort of Jewish group that put it together, totally one-sided. They're not presenting the views of Palestinians. They're not presenting the pro-peace movement's views. Code Pink, Medea Benjamin isn't there. Aaron Monte isn't speaking. So that's where you're getting the pure propaganda. That's the tell that you only hear one side. Remember, Israel Netanyahu so upset with Charlie Kirk because he dared to have Dave Smith at a Turning Point USA event to debate with a pro-Israel supporter, an Israel supporter. So the last thing the Zionists want, the last thing Israel wants is any kind of a discussion, any kind of debate, because they're always going to lose if there's even a semblance, even any legitimacy to the discussion, to the argument. By the way, Ken Splash, thank you so much for calling me a young person, at least honorarily. At General Assembly, federations commit long-term to rebuild Israel. It's quite extraordinary. Israel needs to be rebuilt. I don't know, last I checked, it's Gaza that's been completely destroyed by Israel. But at the federations, Jewish Federation, we're going to rebuild Israel. And the only reason anyone is pushing back is because of that social media and TikTok, and they got the wrong lesson from the Holocaust. They thought the Holocaust meant, the right lesson from the Holocaust is never again. We should never allow any group to be wiped out, any group targeted because of who they are, where they live. But apparently that's not the case. It's fine for Jews, for Israeli Jews, to kill everyone in Gaza, which includes not just Muslims, but also Christians. Also, maybe some other religions too. I think it's mostly Muslims with some Christians. But that's okay. That's fine. The Holocaust is only about, the lesson of the Holocaust is only that Jews alone should be free of the fear of genocide. One more influencer. Here's Van Jones.
This is not about critical race theory on college campuses. This is about Iran. Iran and Qatar have come up with a disinformation campaign that they are running through TikTok and Instagram.
Right. So there, TikTok. And now there's a little bit different. It was a little bit of a shift because when Van Jones made this point, others were saying the same thing. There was another commentator. Maybe it was guy on CNN, Scott Jennings, but maybe I'm wrong about that it was all Qatar and Iran that have infiltrated our media and are bought it and taken it over, and they're using TikTok to promote their propaganda. And of course, you heard Hurwitz and Hillary also blame those platforms for, I guess, informing our young people, educating them. Van Jones is also upset about the knowledge gleaned from the platform.
It's massive. If you are a young person, you open up your phone and all you see is dead Gaza baby, dead Gaza baby, dead Gaza baby, right. Diddy, dead Gaza baby, dead Gaza baby.
I mean, it's supposed to be funny, right? I mean, and I'm not going to, it's just so despicable. It's so loathsome. And what else is he's like saying, oh, you're just seeing the images of dead babies, dead children, and you're getting activated by it. And then he's saying you shouldn't be. I mean, that's what's even more extraordinary, is the argument by Van Jones is, well, you shouldn't be so upset. What do you do with that? This is pure sociopathy. So, it's on steroids. It's the complete absence of concern for human life. And we're seeing this repeatedly throughout our elites, Democratic or Republican. Look, I got some other stories here. We got the data centers coming to the Ag Reserve here in Montgomery County. We also have a veto override, 2 veto overrides, one with respect to the data centers. This is of Governor Wes Moore here in Maryland. The other, his reparations commission veto was overridden, so there's going to be a reparations commission. I'm going to talk about that with Carlos Friday. Tomorrow we're going to be talking politics. I can't remember who is my guest. I I think they're running for. Yes, they're running for Congress. Our guest tomorrow is running for Congress in District 6 against two multimillionaires, April McLean Delaney, John Delaney's wife. He is a former congressman from District 6, so that's Western Maryland here in Maryland. And John Delaney, big time finance guy, he was replaced by David Trone, Total Wine and More. David Trone dropped out to run for the Senate here in Maryland. He lost that race to Angela Brooks. He was replaced in Congress by April McLean Delaney, I should say. And now the two of them are going to square off. Both of them are corporatists. Both of them are super rich. Both of them are pro-Israel. The wealth I don't care so much about. You can be rich as long as you're progressive. We're going to have a man who's challenging them. He'll be on tomorrow. Looking forward to that conversation. And then next week we'll have on another candidate running for Montgomery County Council. So a couple of really interesting conversations coming up with politicians. Friday will be the free-for-all with Carlos. We'll talk the Maryland issues. But just before we go, there just is this complete absence of humanity that we're seeing on both sides of the political aisle. Trump is flailing. Trump is really, he's getting a lot of flack from his own side. Many of his voters were disgusted by his spectacle of making the tragic death of Rob Reiner at the hands of Rob Reiner and his wife at the hands of their son, and Trump making about Trump, saying, oh yeah, well, he brought it on himself with his Trump derangement syndrome, which obviously had nothing to do with what happened. The obvious thirst that Trump has to just destroy Venezuela, even though it will be extraordinarily costly, will turn that country into yet another void, like what we did to Libya, like what we did to Iraq. The fact that his base was in part swayed, and I understand this, by his call for less military adventurism, right? He said, I want us to get out of Ukraine. I don't want anyone to win. I want the killing to stop. And that was a big, a selling point for Trump. And obviously he's gone just the other way, selling out to Mary Madelson. His base is really fed up with him. This is a great opportunity for the Democrats to reach across the aisle on issues that are of great import to the entire country. And instead you get this crap. Instead you get Hillary talking about TikTok and Van Jones talking about TikTok. That has to change. If to make our country start to live up to what the Constitution would seem to promise, we need Democrats who are going to champion poor, struggling, and working people, who are going to champion peace, who are going to champion the environment. And I'm sorry, I love Mike. He was on Monday. He works to elect Democrats. I'm a big fan of Arlen's, a big fan of Ed's. I love them all. I'm not trying to slight anybody. But I think this idea that the Democratic Party is necessarily superior to Republican just doesn't fly unless we see Democrats standing up against the billionaire elites. There's no hope unless you're prepared. And I say you have to be prepared unless you're prepared to do what I do, which is abandon the Democrats and promote a clean, green party alternative. I actually had two of those up there, but we're going to call it a show. I hope you enjoyed it. I did. I always love talking to you folks, and I really appreciate your being part of Halitics. I love the comments. Hopefully we'll get a few calls before the end of the year. Don't forget, click like, click subscribe. I will get back to, by the way, I promise, some of the shorts. I haven't been doing as many as I was. I know those help with the distribution for sure. But again, I'm still kind of fighting this little bit of a cold, and I'm taking it a little bit easier than I would have otherwise. See you tomorrow. Have a great afternoon. Thanks again for being part of Halitics.